Okay, I think we're ready to start. My name is Tim Halpin-Healy, and I'm in the physics department here at Barnard. And I also oversee the science and public policy program here at the college. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Okay, a lot of family, friends, and neighbors, apparently, and some returning, students, Kumini Dubai, and Emily, yeah? All right, from Awareness into Action 1. So here we have Awareness into Action 2, speaking out on the environment. And this is a special panel that's organized under the auspices of the Barnard Science and Public Policy Program. And if I could just take the opportunity, make a little advertisement, for the program. We now offer, I guess since you guys graduated from Awareness into Action 1, we now actually offer a minor, an interdisciplinary minor in science, policy, and ethics. And this minor is built upon the 3 courses in the Science and Public Policy Program. 3333, which is Biodiversity, Genetics, and Society, 3334, Science and the State, which we'll both be offering again next fall, and the most important, of course, for this evening, Science and Public Policy 3335, ELA, otherwise known as ELA, Environmental Leadership, Ethics, and Action. Now, I'd like to point out a little historical fact. The course was originally known as ELA, same thing. But the L stood for literature. All right, but then Diane Dietrich, who oversees the course, understood the importance of leadership, all right, and we've kind of converted the course into ELA with the L meaning leadership, with still a focus on, of course, on the environment and ethics and action. All right, so just an advertisement for the program. I've actually left a couple of cards out. This is totally blatantly advertisement, So there's some cards over by the television about the minor. There's a link on the back of the card if you're interested. So as often is the case for people who find themselves at a podium, I've got some bad news and I've got some good news. So which would you like to hear first? Bad. Of course, you got to hear the bad news first. It's always better to follow up with the good news. So the bad news is partly as a card-carrying faculty member here at Barnard, if I do find myself in front of a room with lots of students, I have to kind of provide a kind of educational moment, seize the opportunity, kind of teaching moment. So I'd like to tell you about something that I recently discovered which actually floored me. I am a scientist. I'm very comfortable with numbers. I deal with numbers every day. But I learned a number recently that just literally knocked me off my feet, all right, and left me speechless. And that number has very much to do with a lot of the issues we'll be talking about tonight. And the number is 26 billion, And try and wrap yourself around that number. It's a big number, all right? If you're a science major, you might say 26 times 10 to the 9th, because we like scientific notation. That's 1 with 9 zeros after it. 26 billion. 26 billion, is actually 26 billion barrels of oil, all right? Is the number of barrels of oil that the global economy consumes annually. 26 billion, So what does that number mean? So I looked at the number as a scientist and I said, it's a big number, but what does it actually mean? So I'm a physicist, so I measure energy in joules. So you can do the conversion. What's the energy content of 26 billion barrels of oil? Well, it turns out to be 160 exajoules. What's an exajoule? I didn't even know what an exajoule was. An exa means 10 to the 18. So that's 1 with 18 zeros after it. 160 times 10 to the 18 joules, oil burned every year by the global economy. So that's an impressive number, obviously. It wasn't even obvious to me. All right, if I think about what that means, well, I know a number like 10 to the 18. 10 to the 18 is the number of seconds that the universe is old. That's the kind of number that physicists and cosmologists are comfortable with. The universe is 10 billion years old, and each year has 31 million seconds, so you do the math, and it turns out to be about 10 to the 18. So 26 billion barrels of oil is basically like having a 60-watt light bulb on since the beginning of the universe. Which, that's getting close to kind of comprehensibility. How many Yankee fans out here? There's got to be at least one Yankee fan, right? So instead of talking about the universe being 10 billion years old, let's talk about how long has Homo sapiens as a species been on the planet. Now, and I'm not an anthropologist, but it's roughly 3 million years. Okay, so you scale back from 10 billion to 3 million, okay, and that gives you a more powerful light bulb. Instead of a 60-watt light bulb, you're basically keeping the night lights of Yankee Stadium on for 3 million years. Okay, the length of time that Homo sapiens has been on the planet. That's how much oil the global economy consumes every year, as if we had the lights of Yankee Stadium on for the entire run of Homo sapiens on the planet. Well, maybe oil is not your favorite fossil fuel. Maybe you like to burn gas. It turns out that 26 billion barrels of oil is equivalent to 150 trillion cubic feet of gas. These numbers mean absolutely nothing, okay, because they're just too big. If you convert the 26 billion barrels of oil into gallons, you get 1 trillion gallons. What is 1 trillion gallons? So this is where I fell off my feet. 1 trillion gallons, okay, all of you science majors and not classics majors out there, you can do the math. 26 billion barrels of oil, 1 trillion gallons of oil is 1 cubic mile of oil. 1 cubic mile. Every year, a solid cubic or a liquid cubic mile of oil gets consumed by our global economy. And that represents 1/3 of the total, okay, because there are other forms of fuel. 1 cubic mile of oil. It's actually now a unit, a CMO, okay? So a cubic mile, I said to myself, okay, that's really impressive. I could figure this out, but the ocean is like huge. It's 100 million cubic miles, so it's like a drop in the bucket. The problem is, if you look at the proven oil reserves, what we know is available in terms of oil that can be extracted, it's only 43 cubic miles, 43 CMOs. So 43, and we're consuming, okay, 1 per year. 43 is an easy number to grasp, okay? It's 4 cases of wine. It's 4 dozen bagels, okay? 43, 48, this is definitely a graspable number. And the bad news is that we don't have a lot of oil. Maybe we'll find a lot more. If you got to talk about gas, okay, that gives you a factor of 2. You talk about coal, maybe a factor of 3, all right? So that's the bad news. But it's a very manageable, impressive number, okay? It certainly got me thinking. So what's the good news? The good news is that we have 12 students, okay, very driven, very focused, very educated, okay, on matters of science and public policy, and we're going to be hearing a lot from them tonight. So I'd like to turn the podium over to Shelby. All right, she's going to be our moderator this evening. And thanks so much for coming. And I tip my hat to the students. This is a very, very special occasion. All right, this is Awareness into Action 2. It's only the second occasion in which I have seen, in the 20 years that I've been at Barnard, students organizing a panel, okay, of this importance and this magnitude. All right, my hat goes off to you. Good luck tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing more good news. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Dear students, scholars, and professionals, welcome. On behalf of Barnard College's Environmental Leadership Ethics and Action course, I would like to welcome you to the culmination of this semester's work, Awareness into Action 2, Speaking Out on the Environment. My name is Shelby Lane, and I am a junior at Barnard, and a member of this semester's class. This course is a part, as mentioned, of Barnard's Science and Public Policy program, whose director is Tim Halpin-Healy. The mission of this class is to deepen students' understandings of the human role in nature and their interactions with and effects on Earth's ecosystem and biogeochemical cycles. Each student has been motivated to find her personal passion for the environment and to inspire others to act as well. The mission of this course has certainly proven to be true throughout the semester. Each student has chosen her own project and path to explore, which has produced 12 unique interactions with the environment. 12 students have found their personal motivations and ways in which their projects have connected with human life and the surrounding environment. Our projects are quite varied, ranging from local and national topics, such as Americans composting, to international topics, such as degradation of Tibetan grasslands. It was fascinating to see the way in which each student approached the class from a personal perspective, each one using her strengths, interests, background, and knowledge to create a green action project that addressed a personal environmental concern. Each project involved setting goals for the semester and writing weekly blog posts. These posts involved in-depth research and weekly journalistic interviews. Such research allowed students to delve deeper into their subject matters and to educate each of their readers. Professors Diane Dittrich and Randall Baumer, adjunct instructor Catherine Bagley, and speaking fellow Lauren Seaman have all guided students throughout their projects, helping each one of us face any roadblocks and constantly acting as sources of inspiration and encouragement throughout the course of the class. The classroom provided a space for each of us to brainstorm our ideas and to help one another on our personal trajectories. I am so honored to see all of you here this evening to learn about our Green Action projects and to hear the ways in which we have each strived to make a difference in the field of environmentalism. Without further ado, I present to you the Fall 2011 class of Environmental Leadership, Ethics, and Action. Thank you. One last thing, Tech has also asked that should anyone need to slip out early, if you could please either go around the back or use an aisle in which the camera is not sitting. Thank you. So our first subject matter for the evening will be New York and the environment. So if the students in that subject could please come up. Thank you. Our first presenter will be Anna Newman, and she will be speaking about school gardens in New York City and beyond.
Hi, my name is Anna Newman, and as Shelby said, I'm going to talk about school gardens and community gardens. So one really important issue in New York City is the issue of food deserts. Food desert is an area where it's really hard to find fresh, local, healthy, and affordable food. And unfortunately, in New York City and in a lot of other cities, especially in low-income areas, there are a lot of food deserts. And this leads to a rise in obesity and diabetes and other health problems. And as we know, in New York City, there's a much higher rate of obesity and diabetes than there is in other parts of the country. So it's something really important to look at. And it also, there's just when it's really hard to find fresh, healthy vegetables, there's a general lack of awareness about how to eat and live sustainably. So one way that we found to combat this is through community and school gardens. And there are a lot of benefits to these gardens. One is, first of all, they provide fresh and healthy food to students and parents and community members in neighborhoods where they exist, which is something that already right there, you're taking the food desert out because you're providing fresh vegetables. And they also help to increase awareness about the environment and sustainability, because when kids are actually planting their own food and seeing the process of it growing, it helps them think about how their food gets to their plate, and in general, the process of growing food, eating food, and what it means to grow food sustainably. There are also a lot of academic benefits to having gardens. It's a great opportunity for hands-on experiential learning. You can incorporate it into almost any subject, so that's a really great opportunity to incorporate school gardens. And it also creates leadership among students. When students are responsible for growing even a plot of land, or maybe they plant a tomato and they are responsible for growing that seed into a tomato that they can eat, it gives them ownership of something, and creates leaders in these students who will then go on to create more awareness among their peers about living sustainably. So throughout my project, I looked at several different models of school gardens and how they use these gardens in order to increase environmental sustainability, leadership, academic performance, and other things. So a couple really cool gardens that I investigated. One is the Columbia Secondary School, which has a pretty traditional vegetable garden, but has started a great program that creates leaders in the classroom, leaders among a small group of students who are then spreading their knowledge and their awareness to the other students in the class. And I also investigated several other types of programs. One is a very high-tech greenhouse, which uses the newest technologies to get kids interested in gardening and in science, and they teach all of their elementary school science classes in the garden, in the greenhouse. And they've seen like a huge increase in excitement about science, which is really great for students. I also investigated agricultural high schools, which are agricultural programs designed to prepare students for careers in agriculture. And one other garden that I looked at in depth was the White House garden. So Michelle Obama has started a garden at the White House which has these same goals in order to get students involved in growing their food and knowing where their food comes from, and also providing healthy, fresh vegetables to people in the DC area. Throughout the course of the project, though, I also realized several challenges that revolve around these gardens, mainly in that right now there's not really enough awareness or support for these gardens. So a lot of the teachers who are involved are really overwhelmed by the amount of work that they have to do, and I spoke to several teachers who said that they think it's a really great thing, but it's only them, and right now there's not enough support behind these gardens to make it a widespread solution to food deserts. So I think that going forward, we just have to raise awareness about the potential benefits of gardens and get more people involved, more people excited about it, and that will help to solve a lot of these challenges.
Our next speaker will be Claire Matheson, speaking about composting, creating a sustainable relationship between the land and the city.
Hi, thank you for coming. I've done my project on composting with a focus on the program here at Barnard. America has a huge waste problem. We send approximately 165 million tons of waste to landfills every year, and considering the Earth doesn't have an infinite amount of space for us to store our waste, eventually we're going to have to restructure the system. 14% of the waste stream is organic, so we can use composting, which is the decomposition of organic materials like food scraps and yard waste, to reduce our waste problem. Composting has been around longer than humans have. It happens when decomposers like worms and microorganisms break down organic materials into a soil-like material that's rich in nutrients, which is known as compost. And plants, like humans, need nutrients to grow. So in applying compost to fields and gardens, we give them those necessary nutrients and allow new plant life to thrive. I was inspired to do this project by a program in my hometown of Alameda, California, which has a municipal composting program where it's just as easy to compost as it is to take out the garbage and recycling, because there's a yard waste bin where you place your organic materials and then you just take it out to the curb every week. So once I came to Barnard and started cooking in my dorm, I missed the convenience of this system and didn't like knowing that my food scraps were ending up in landfills where they were just taking up space and not doing anything to help the earth. So I decided to investigate the program here at Barnard, which the first component is the compost tumbler, which is between Lehman Library and Altschul Hall. It composts primarily yard waste from the grounds, although students can also use it to deposit their own food scraps. However, it doesn't operate between Thanksgiving and spring break because the compost it produces is used only on the ground. So during the winter months when they're snowy, there's not much use for them because there's not much yard work going on. The second component is the BioX machine, which is in the Hewitt dining hall kitchen. It composts all the food scraps from Hewitt, and it includes microorganisms, which break it down into a liquid form, and then it drains to the sewer system. And this is a great way to reduce the waste of the Hewitt dining hall, considering most of it's organic. But it doesn't do anything to recycle the organic materials and return nutrients to the soil. So I have a long-term vision of bringing an organics pickup program to Barnard, which would consist of bins in the dorms with kitchens and in the dining halls, where students could place their organic waste. Many of the pieces for such a program are already in place. For example, Action Carting, which is the company that picks up our garbage and recycling, also offers organics pickup, so we wouldn't have to go out and find a new company. We just have to recruit them to add an additional service for Barnard College. While there will definitely be many challenges in instating such a program, Barnard has the opportunity to become a much more sustainable place in joining communities like Alameda in starting large-scale composting programs, and it can also act as a model for future communities, especially colleges that are interested in starting similar programs. If you're interested in having an organics program at Barnard, it would be great if you could sign this sheet after the program. I'm going to have it with me in the networking section, and we're going to use it to gauge student interest and show Barnard that its students want it to become a more sustainable community. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Lindsay Garton, speaking about hydrofracking in New York State.
Hydraulic fracturing, or hydrofracking, is a serious problem facing the state of New York. Hydrofracking is a method used to extract natural gas from below the surface. There are two ways to hydrofrack, through vertical drilling and through horizontal drilling. Vertical drilling, which is drilling straight down into the surface, has been used for many years. This new method of horizontal hydrofracking is what's inciting all the controversy. Horizontal hydrofracking is where they drill straight down into the surface and then they drill horizontally. This method, in order to extract natural gas by hydrofracking, it is necessary to inject millions of gallons of water laced with dangerous chemicals into the rock formation. In New York, this rock formation is called the Marcellus Shale, which is located in the Catskills region of the state. Through hydrofracking, millions of gallons of wastewater are generated. This wastewater is trucked to wastewater treatment plants, which are not capable of treating this much water. The untreated water can run off into rivers, lakes, streams, where it can contaminate our drinking water supply. If the state of New York uses this new horizontal drilling method, it is almost certain that our drinking water will be contaminated. Furthermore, this could affect New York City because if there is hydrofracking in our state, it would be done in the Catskills region, which is upstream from the city, hence the contaminated water would flow downstream. We know that drinking water contamination will almost certainly happen because we saw that in Pennsylvania, where they are currently using this horizontal drilling method, drinking water in areas near Pittsburgh has already been contaminated, forcing the city to give its residents bottled water. Other states that have allowed horizontal drilling have also experienced drinking water contamination problems. In New York, the current controversy is about the Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Statement, or SGEIS, which is about 1,500 pages long, as well as the fracking regulations, which are also about the same length. Environmentalists were initially concerned about the 90-day comment period on both of these lengthy documents. Now, which was just announced last week, the comment period has been extended until January 11th. If you wish to comment on the SGEIS or the fracking regulations, you can go to the New York State Department of Environment's website, or DEC for short, where there's a link right on the homepage with detailed information about how to comment. Now back to the politics of the situation. Normally, the state would ask for comments on the SGEIS, work with those, and then ask for comments on the fracking regulations. But this isn't the case. Right now, they're asking you to comment on both at the same time. Environmental groups have labeled this the state's rush to frack. Even though the process of hydrofracking is bad for the environment, clearly the process about whether to allow hydrofracking is also inciting controversy. This past month, there have been many protests against hydrofracking at hearings that have been held throughout the state. It's fairly clear that many residents are concerned about fracking. If Governor Cuomo decides that we should use this new horizontal drilling method, it is clear that there will be a great deal of environmental consequences for the state. These consequences must be considered when the government makes their decision on this topic. It is without a doubt that hydrofracking will be a problem to face our state for the next couple of years, whether we allow it or not. In other states that have placed moratoriums on fracking, gas companies have threatened to sue. I don't envy the governor who will have to make a decision on this topic. I only ask that he make an informed and wise decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic matter will be the collapse of colonies. Our first speaker will be Lydia Schulman, and she will be speaking about coral reefs.
So throughout the semester, I've been blogging about coral reefs. I've been learning about some of the threats that they face, some of the human-made problems that are facing them, and that they're becoming degraded. So behind you is a picture of quite a beautiful coral reef. Unfortunately, most of the reefs in the world are not in this great of a condition. So my personal interest in coral reefs comes from the fact that I'm a scuba diver. For the past 10 years, I've been really lucky to have the opportunity to explore these beautiful biodiverse ecosystems. Coral reefs are home to about 25% of marine life in the ocean. They're found in waters off the coasts of about 100 different countries around the world, and they're extremely vital ecosystems for different marine fisheries. They're very important to tourist economies of many nations. So I basically want to talk about, one, why coral reefs matter, and also what it says about our relationship with ecosystems, that they're degrading and that their health is at risk. So before I get into that, I just want to mention some of the main threats that coral reefs face. A few that I mentioned in my blogs were pollution, both direct pollution and non-point source pollution. Also, coral reefs are threatened by overfishing and by other destructive fishing practices that basically eliminate a lot of the fish that form really integral parts of the ecosystems on reefs. And finally, climate change. It's probably one of the biggest threats to reefs because corals are extremely delicate animals. They can only live in very specific temperatures and water pHs, and as carbon emissions increase in the world, these conditions of the ocean change, and that negatively impacts these extremely delicate ecosystems. So just kind of to put this in perspective, some reports that I've read indicate that over 10% of the world's coral reefs have been lost in the last decade. So that alone astounded me, but as I kept reading, as I kept doing research for my blog, I would read these other statistics that say that if we don't do something to mitigate these problems, that all of the world's coral reefs could go extinct in the next 50 to 100 years. So I guess that was something that really disturbed me on a number of levels, both on a micro level, what does it mean for the world that coral reefs could be entirely lost, and also just on a larger level that speaks to a lot of the issues that we're talking about in this panel, just about our relationship with the planet. So coral reefs, as I said, are an integral part in marine fisheries. So it's estimated that they provide economic goods and ecosystems, ecosystem services in the form of fisheries, industries, and tourism. That's about $375 billion US per year. In many small island countries, it really forms a large amount of their income. So if you lose the coral reefs, you lose all of the fisheries and you lose all the economic benefits that they bring, and people really lose their livelihoods. And just on a larger scale, I want to express, and I think that you'll hear from other students, that we need to have a broader understanding of how what we do interacts with other ecosystems, that we're not isolated in this planet, and that everything we do can impact something else. Fortunately, I do think that there's hope for coral reefs. If anyone in the audience is actually a scuba diver, there's a lot of really unique opportunities to participate through scuba in coral reef monitoring exercises. And basically, through scuba, you can go to different reefs and you can analyze actually the conditions of the corals. And if we better understand which corals are degrading, which are under threat, then we can better solve these problems. The general public can also just educate themselves about the issues that reefs face, and better understanding can help us advocate for policy for the creation of marine protection zones and to take further action. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next student is Fiamma Van Biema. The disappearance of the buzz, colony collapse disorder.
Okay, I'm going to try to remember to click. I usually have problems with this. My mom goes into anaphylactic shock whenever she's stung by a bee. So growing up, I used to run around the house with a wooden clog in hand, which as I grew older somehow turned into a rubber clog, trying to smack and smash every single bee that I found. But little did I know that 1 out of every 3 bites of the food I ate was the direct result of the work of a small and industrious insect. And that insect is the honeybee. Those insects that I feared the most because they were of mortal threat to my mother were are directly involved in the reproduction and pollination of several vitamin-producing crops, including blueberries, squash, pumpkins, and apples, and especially almonds. And this busy little honeybee is mysteriously disappearing. As an essential link in the food chain, it has somehow become one of the weakest links. In March 2006, David Hackenberg, a Pennsylvania beekeeper, noticed a sharp and drastic decline in the number of his bee colonies. But more troubling than this actual decline in the number of bee colonies, because bees have declined over centuries, and it's not very surprising that bees continue to decline, was the fact that the bees failed to return to their nests. They weren't found dead in the hive, they weren't found dead around the hive, and even more troubling was that the other bees failed to forage the hives that were replete with pollen and honey. So this sudden and sharp decline, and in particular the bizarre characteristics associated with this decline, were named after much debate from scientists colony collapse disorder. So now that we've given it a name, colony collapse disorder, what on earth is causing it? So here we are 5 years later in 2011, after the disorder was first noticed by the Pennsylvania beekeeper, and we still don't have an answer to one of the most important questions regarding CCD. What on earth is causing it? So to pretty much all scientists believe that CCD is being caused by the interaction of multiple factors that are acting synergistically, but there's a lot of debate about whether some factors are more important than others in causing CCD. So some scientists think it's pesticides, and in particular neonicotinoids. Others feel that it's viruses. Still others feel that it's the lack of genetic diversity among the queen bees. And others that I spoke to felt that it was the stress that the bees were being exposed to by being trucked to pollinate big monocultures. And they're fed the bee equivalent of fast food on these trucking journeys. So a lot of it thought it was the nutrients that they were receiving in the trucks. So wait a second, why does this even matter anyway? I mean, they were a mortal threat to my mother. They were going to kill her, and I was running around smacking them. So bees play a much more important role in our food chain than we tend to believe. And while we can't set out like Sherlock Holmes, as one of the beekeepers that I spoke to put it, and become entomologists or beekeepers overnight and understand immediately why the bees are abandoning ship, what we can do is we can understand, as Tom Theobald, a Boulder, Colorado beekeeper put it, that bees are like the canaries in the coal mine, and they are our windows into the natural world. The bees have such a wide-ranging effect on our food production and on the foods that we eat, that if something mysterious is happening to them, it's well our worth to inquire what is going on with them. So as I conclude, I reflect on my childhood experience where I used to run around and smash the bees. And in an effort to educate children, I decided to elaborate a blog/website that would instruct them on the complex interweavings of the natural world, and attempt to save perhaps a few bees that would die from an untimely death from a clog. And so this is a world that hosts such a tiny, little, and sometimes frightening, definitely to me, insect that has such complex effects on our survival. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next subject matter will be alternative ways of bringing the environment into your life. Our first speaker is Eliza Stein, speaking about biomimicry.
So I bet that every single person in this room has some sort of technology on them right now, whether it's a camera or a smartphone or a Kindle or an iPod. They have some sort of technology on them. And that's because we're a society that loves technology. You know, the newest iPhone came out, 1 million people pre-ordered it on the first day of pre-orders only. What if we could take that passion as a society that we have for technology and translate it into passion for the environment as well? The problem with that is that technology and the environment are not the same thing. We think of technology as this big monster that's out to destroy nature, right? The modern world kills the environment. But it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be viewed as opposing ideas. Technology and nature are, in fact, sort of one and the same. There's a concept called biomimicry. Biomimicry is this idea that after 3.8 billion years, the world around us has sort of figured it out. It's found some problems and it's attempted to fix them. So what if we could look to nature and find the solutions to some of the technological and modern problems that we're now facing? Well, we can do that, and we do that. Think about the shark. Sharks are big, they're scary, they're in the water, but what can they do to help us with technology? Well, actually, they've been used to create cars that are more aerodynamic, and their skin has been modeled for swimsuits. But what I think is the most interesting thing is they've been used to help our healthcare system. Shark skin is made up of these microscopic diamonds that for some reason, bacteria colonies do not form on the skin of a shark. Energetically, it is unfavorable for them to form a colony on these microscopic diamonds. So Sharklet Technologies is this company that looked at sharks and realized that bacteria colonies won't form on their skin and thought, well, why don't we utilize this? So they talked to another company and they made a film that mimics shark skin, and you can now put this film on, doorknobs or railings, places where, kindergartens where kids are running around with all their germs, or hospitals where there's all this bacteria everywhere, and bacteria colonies won't form. This isn't like drugs where you can where bacteria who are drug resistant can then form and you have another issue on your hands. This is a no-kill tactic, which stops bacteria colonies from forming and can save a lot of people's lives. But it's not just big animals like sharks that make a difference, it's also little creatures like bugs. This is the Namib desert beetle. It lives in one of the driest deserts in the world. There's not that much water, but it needs to drink. So what it does is it climbs up to the top of a sand dune and it sticks its butt in the air, and the fog condenses on the beetle's shell. And if you can see, there's little bumps, and the bumps on the beetle's shell, they're hydrophilic, which means they love water, and they're this sort of made of this almost glass-like texture. And a droplet will form on top of the bump. And once the droplet's big enough, it slides off into the crevices, which are really waxy. And the water droplets just sort of funnel down into the beetle's mouth. And that way, even though there's only fog, there's no rain, the beetle's able to drink. So we have successfully mimicked this technology, and we call it fog harvesting. And you can go to places where people can't get enough water to drink and collect water. The newest energy-efficient color screen that can play videos, has no glare from the sun, and still has vibrant colors. It's inspired by butterfly wings. We have a society that's dependent on technology, and that's really not a bad thing. But telling people to stop driving cars or to tell them to stop leaving their air conditioning on, those ideas are not working. We need to find a new tactic. Biomimicry provides innovative and sustainable solutions that can bring our modern technological world to the next level, but only if we protect our inspiration. So let's take our love for technology and our love for the newest and best things and use it to inspire ourselves to protect the world that has the answers to all our problems.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Catherine Thayer, speaking about eating greens, better food choices changing our world.
So, do you think that the Metropolitan Museum of Art would turn down a $100,000 donation if the donor did not have an extensive knowledge of ancient Egyptian art? No. We live in a society that does not think about or act on behalf of the environment enough, but given the option between action and understanding, I choose action. So how do we get more people to participate in environmental action? I propose through food and an environmentalism that is fun and inviting and lets awareness come second. Let's make it automatic and engaging first and let understanding grow. So I see local, fresh, natural foods potential to make environmentalism easy and social and fun, and want to mainstream our ecologically conscious decisions. I teamed up with two other girls, Shavina and Angie, who are also frustrated with the environmental lameness and the lack of a vibrant, active community that we think environmentalism deserves, and we made Purple. It's a once-a-week pop-up student-run cafe that gets farmers market ingredients that are low carbon footprint, low food mile, subtly vegetarian, and we cook with a community of student chefs and then sell the lunches here on campus to show that this is a stylish, fun, easy way to make ecologically conscious decisions. And judging from our fast sellouts and our offers to do catering on campus, I think we're proving that it's cool and fun to be green. But environmental concern isn't what's selling lunches. We're moving mezclun by the bushel because people like the aesthetic setup of our table, and the lunches taste really good, and the community around the food is really inviting and fun. But is it bad to have more style than substance? I don't think so. There's participation happening for the environment that would not be happening otherwise. Students, teachers, administrators are really excited about our food. And so, by extension, they're really excited about the environment, too. There's a similar trend that I see outside the Barnard gates of awareness following behind, but following action. And one example of this is in farmers markets. They reduce food miles and associated transmissions of flying foods across national borders and from one side of the country to the other. They promote a biodiversity in our local ecosystems because smaller farmers mean more different kinds of crops, and they economically support the farmers that are growing these foods. But most of the people shopping there, some of whom I interviewed, are there because the food tastes really good and it's a fun shopping experience. This popularity is in no way harming the environmental benefits that the farmers markets are providing. And in fact, so many people like it for these fun reasons that farmers markets increased 17% in the last year and 400% since 1995, meaning that more of the benefits of these kinds of fun environmental activist projects are being realized. This is also true with vegetarianism. Not a lot of people seem to understand all of the specifics and all of the environmental reasons for it, but there's a societal acceptance of eating less meat, flexitarianism, in which people who maybe eat some meat can feel included in this movement and can feel like they're making healthy environmental choices sometimes. And this is really facilitated by restaurants sponsoring flexitarianism, having vegetarian and meat eater options on the menu, and by cookbooks talking about how to eat a better diet for the environment. And our fork votes really do matter. It might seem frivolous to just eat good food, but it makes a difference. This year, for the very first time, Food Day was celebrated, and it was modeled after Earth Day to bring awareness to sustainable farms, to the agribusiness subsidies and factory farming that's hurting our national ecological system. And it was celebrated with 2,000 dinners and parties, but it had a real impact and directly inspired the Local Farms Food and Jobs Act to be included in the 2012 Farm Bill. And this is legislation that will further facilitate production and consumption of local food, help the farmers doing it, and create a better system. So there's action happening, and maybe not fully based on understanding, but the environment relies on us acting towards improvement. And I know that you are all here because you are ecologically aware and you care. And I'm sure that you all have passions like my passion for food and can find ways to insert environmentalism into a fun and easy and approachable system. And I hope you do that. And I hope I'll see you for lunch at Purple next semester.
Thank you. Our next student is Gabriella Spitzer, speaking on environmentalist art.
So, like Eliza, I wanted to do a project that brought two different parts of my life together. Myself as an artist and myself as an environmentalist. And I wasn't really sure how that was going to work out for me because I hadn't done a project like this before. I don't study art. And I wanted to see what could happen when I brought art and environmentalism together. And I found that a lot of people have been asking some of the same questions I'm asking, and they're coming up with slightly different answers. So I have 3 different suggestions for what environmentalist or environmental art could be that I want to share with you today. So the first example is that environmentalist art is naturalist art. And one example of this is Thomas Cole, who was an artist who started the Hudson River School of Art. And he was very focused on painting landscapes and preserving the light and showing the beauty, especially as industrialization was happening. I looked at different kinds of art, not just visual art, though I am a visual artist. And Annie Dillard is one of my favorite authors, and she's fantastic. And she was very focused on herself as a environmentalist, but not necessarily environmentalist, mostly a naturalist writer. And in Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, she writes, "We have, as usual, been asking the wrong question. It does not matter a hoot what the mockingbird on the chimney is singing. The real and proper question is, why is it beautiful?" So that's sort of an anti-science and non-environmentalist response, but it's deeply naturalist. And that's a different approach to environmentalist art. And my final suggestion or example of environmentalist naturalist art is art that is within nature. So at Storm King Art Center, about an hour north of here in the Hudson River Valley, we have an art center that places sculpture within nature. And so these are some of the sculptures, the view of the South Field. And this is Wave Field by Maya Lin, who you might know from the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. And she set up these crevices and hills that both mimic the ocean, but also mimic the hills behind and around. And that itself is art within the environment and naturalist art within nature. So another way, my second suggestion of how, or sort of answer to the question of what is environmentalist art, is that environmentalist art uses natural media. So this is of particular importance to me as an artist, because when I paint, some of my paints are highly toxic. For example, cadmium pigments, really not so good for you, and at some point in high school, I realized that I should stop opening the jars of paint, or the little tubes of paint with my mouth. Really bad idea. But it took a long time for me to figure that one out. But this is Andy Goldsworthy, and he works within the natural environment itself. And here he has taken some leaves and pinned them to the ground using thorns. And he's taken a picture of this sort of swirl shape that he made. And here he's dug holes, and he's taken leaves to make these really nifty shapes within the holes. And this is an example of using natural media. Environmentalist art uses natural media and is intimately connected to the environment. And my third suggestion for what environmentalist art could be, is that environmentalist art is inspired by environmental issues in the world and helps us envision a different kind of world. So this is a piece of art that came out of an organization called Cape Farewell, which was started in part by the artist David Bucknell. And it's an organization that brings artists to different ecological zones to explore climate change and to create art influenced by those experiences. So they go to different places and they create art there, and when they come home with art that has been influenced. So here he projected an image onto the ice, and he had to get the lighting perfect because there was just this liminal moment of transition that was when the lighting was perfect for the ice and for the photograph, and it sort of marks this moment of transition that Bucknell is really about. And he talks about how when you get a shift in society, just like what we're experiencing now and that we're at the very start of, in terms of having to shift the way that we're doing things environmentally because of all of the issues of resources that we're talking about in the panel today. He says that when you have this shift, you can always find an artist in that place because that's their territory. They like it when it's unstable and exciting going forward. So one thing that draws me to environmentalism is how open and interdisciplinary it is, and how you have to get the lawyers, and you have to get the scientists, and you have to bring all the different people together. And I think that one thing that's really important that we can do today is to expand that awareness of who can be part of an environmentalist tent, and to say that we need the scientists and we also need the artists to help envision a bigger and a more sustainable world.
Thank you. We now have Kiana Millinger speaking about the overexploitation of medicinal plants and its environmental effects.
Plants are valuable and beautiful resources that play an important part in our everyday lives, from serving as a producer of oxygen, being a source of food, to even bringing color to our world with its blossoming flowers. Plants play many, many other roles also, but today I shall only focus on one role, which is its importance in the medicinal field. So some plants that are used in modern day medicine would be the daffodil, where its flowers are used to stop the progression of Alzheimer's disease, the foxglove, which is used to prevent and treat heart failure, and a willow tree, which serves as our everyday aspirin. Unfortunately, many plants like these are overharvested by pharmaceutical companies and local peoples. Overharvesting is simply the collection of plants in an unsustainable manner. There are two ways to overharvest plants in an unsustainable manner, such as harvesting all the species in one specific area without leaving a few behind to replenish itself, or harvesting specific parts of a plant, such as that leads to its demise, such as harvesting the roots of a plant and harvesting the bark of a tree. Pharmaceutical companies has overharvested in both of these ways, and it has not only affected plants, but it has affected the whole ecosystem. Animals are also affected by these, as they lose a source of food, water, and raw material. For an example, the common starling is a plant that relies on a yarrow to line its nest. Without the yarrow, the common starling would be extremely affected if it was to lose this plant. Also, we are affected by overharvesting, mostly local peoples, mostly local peoples who live in an area where pharmaceutical companies overharvest, as they rely heavily on those plants in that area. They use those plants as a source of income if they're to sell them to pharmaceutical companies or other people. They also use the plants for personal uses such as culinary, religious, and medicinal uses. Ignorance also perpetuates the problem of overharvesting. We can see this as many local peoples are unaware that they are harvesting, and you can see this in one study that took place in the upper Himalayan mountains, where the study shows that 81% of the respondents in the district organizations and the national organizations believe that the plants in the upper Himalayan mountains are endangered, compared to the 28% of local peoples who believe this. That's over 2 times the amount of people who believe this. This shows simply that many of the local peoples are not aware of the fact that they are overharvesting in the ways that they are overharvesting in their environment. Also, we as city dwellers are not aware that we perpetuate the problem of overharvesting. And we see this by us taking our common daily pills such as aspirin and painkillers and not knowing the fact that these pills are actually the products of overexploitations by the pharmaceutical industries. So why does this matter to us? It matters to us because if we allow this overharvesting to continue, many of these plants will cease to exist. The medicinal properties in these plants will forever be lost, and potential cures to illnesses such as AIDS and even cancer may slip through our hands. So it's very important for us to remember that these plants are not infinite resources. So what are some things that we can do to solve this? What are some possible solutions? We could encourage or even pressure some of the companies to harvest in a sustainable way. We can teach some of the local peoples how to harvest in a sustainable way. And we as consumers of pharmaceuticals can be more aware of what we're using. We can ask questions such as, is this plant endangered? What part of the plant is harvested? And how does it affect the local ecosystem? And find the answers to these questions as they lead to tell us if a certain company is sustainable or if it is not. So we have added to this problem of overharvestation by allowing companies to fail at their purpose, which is to provide another, to bring more treatments and cures into the world. And we have failed, and they have failed at this by simply overharvesting plants to the point of endangerment and even extinction. So we should choose not to support this. And we can choose not to support this by being more aware consumers and being more understanding of which products that we are buying. We should choose to support plants. We should choose to support our healthcare. We should choose to support life.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. Our next topic will be sociocultural international issues.
Our first speaker will be Seishu Dolma on grassland degradation in Tibet.
So, I think everyone seems to be talking about China's miraculous growth in the past 30 years. I mean, we discuss this in classrooms, and it's always in the media, such as cartoons like this, where China seems like it's just totally buying America, and China as a world superpower seems very imminent. However, what is being left out of these discussions is that in China there's a huge socioeconomic and development gap between the eastern and the western part. So when we talk about this, the miraculous growth, it's actually only being witnessed in the eastern parts, in cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong, while the western parts, which are mainly populated by ethnic minorities such as Tibetans and Uyghurs and the Mongols, these areas are being left behind. So ever since the Chinese government has recognized this gap, the government has been pushing for ecological and, well, they call it sustainable development policies for these Western areas. And so the government has the most popular policy has been the grassland policy, where the government specifically barricades in certain areas. And as you can see in this photo, the brown areas are is left as ungrazable, and it's fenced in. And it is actually proven that when you leave grasslands ungrazed, then it is more susceptible to degradation. And the degradation of grasslands is relevant because in the Tibetan highlands, there's a huge deposit of carbon underneath, and when the grassland rapidly degrades, then the amount of carbon being released in the air also contributes to the global climate change. And this is most significant in the Tibetan highlands because there's around more than 40,000 glaciers in Tibet, which is the highest amount of freshwater reserve outside the two poles. So Tibet is like sometimes known as the third pole. And as you can see in this photo, the above picture is from 1921 and the one below is from today. And this is near Mount Everest. As you can see, the glaciers in the bottom part has, for the most part, around 30% disappeared today. And this is significant because as these glaciers continue to disappear in a very accelerated rate, the rivers which start from Tibet is actually they get destabilized, and these rivers are very important because they serve as the source of life for 1/3 of the global population living downstream. And so with this in mind, recently, last year, in Pakistan, around 14 million people were displaced and left homeless because of the flash floods, which were directly linked to the destable environment of Tibet. And this summer, I will actually be traveling to Tibet and with a small group of volunteers in partnership with Colombia's Office of Civil Action and Engagement, and also with the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, and from funding from the Donald and Shelley Rubin Foundation. And we will be working on waste management problems in the grasslands of Tibet. And this is the improper disposal, the mismanagement of waste in Tibet is a huge problem, because as I showed in these waters, these wastes are actually being placed in these headwaters, and it will inevitably start contaminating the water for people living downstream too. So this summer we plan on doing very simple work in terms of promoting composting and promoting resources and flyers such as, to reduce the usage of plastic. Thank you.
Next, sorry. Wei Yu Hao is speaking, and oil is the color of my skin.
My blog, Oil is the Color of My Skin, intended to eliminate the detached relationship between the American consumer, the demand for oil, and the exploited areas where oil is extracted. Some of you may be wondering, why oil? Oil is the most valuable resource in the world, and Americans consume more oil than any other country. Almost everything we use or do can be traced back to it, yet Americans are unaware of where oil is coming from. I went to a local gas station to ask passerbys how much they knew about what they were pumping in their tanks. I found that the majority of people could not answer. Others said the Middle East. These answers show that Americans have become so blinded by the face value of things. We see Nikes and not the 20-hour workday that it took to produce it. We see oil and not the communities that it affects. Today, I hope to bring your attention to communities that are adversely affected by the increasing demand for oil. Some are close by, like the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that destroyed the fishing businesses of Black, Vietnamese, and Cambodian fishermen. Others are 1,000 miles away, like Black oil markets of Guatemala, that has led to the removal of indigenous people to Colombia, where there's oil wars against terrorist groups who demand that oil profits be sent back to their communities. Around the world, people in oil-rich areas refer to oil as a curse. I didn't know what this meant until I got the opportunity to witness what oil development is doing to the indigenous Sequoia community in the Ecuadorian Amazon. My internship was with a nonprofit student-based organization called Esperanza International. I stayed in a homestay for 2 months, and in that time, I never saw as much devastation as I did in my life. Oil companies knocked down houses to drill, leaving people displaced. And they were not held accountable for leaks that ran in nearby rivers, the same rivers where people fished, washed clothes, took a bath. Empty houses were left along the way where people died off of cancer due to exposure to contamination. It was obvious that oil profits were not returning back into these communities, and there were limited jobs available. A small number got a chance to work for the same oil companies that were killing their people. This is not only the story of my host family that were in the pictures, but it's the story of 1,000 of indigenous people and Afro-Colombians who have been displaced from their home. It is the story of terrorist groups and pirates of the Niger Delta called MED, or Movement of the Emancipation of the Niger Delta, who are fighting for oil profits to be returned back to their communities. It is the story of Angola, who despite a booming oil industry, most live in poverty and without basic access to medical care. Yet, these are examples of fortunate situations. But for me, it's more of a reflection on us. I discovered that there are 2 problems. The first is the way we perceive people in oil-rich areas, like in the Niger Delta and in Ecuador. We see them as burdens that are in the way of our resources. This idea has led to many social inequalities that often affect many disadvantaged communities of color. Oil has become more important than their well-being and their lives. I'm here to remind you that nothing should be more valued than someone's life. The second problem is that Americans have come to accept things as the way they are, and we feel that we have no power to change them, but we do. I encourage you to be aware of the media that only shows you one side to a story, and know that it's your responsibility to find out the truth. For example, the news may say there's an increase of piracy in the Niger Delta. You need to ask why. I encourage you to do your own research and become more skeptical about information that is just given to you. The second thing that you should take away is to be more conscious about the way you live your life and how we affect others around you and even those 1,000 miles away. I am asking you to make a change. I know this could be hard to do. After all, I came back from the Amazon and it was really hard for me not to get back into my old ways. I'm not asking you to never drive a car again, but what I'm asking you to do is to define what a change means for you. Maybe it's walking instead of taking a car to a grocery store that is 3 blocks away. This is an example of a small change, but small changes add up to bigger ones and they do matter. Just to give you an example of my own little small change, I am part of an Esperanza International Jewelry Project. We created this project in the Sequoia community. The objective is to bring jewelry that was made by Sequoia women, some of which I'm wearing today. And the funds will then contribute to an education fund for the Sequoia women in the Amazon. This is not for my benefit, but it's for those like my host mother, who I have connected with from across the globe. Many people may have said that this connection is not possible. After all, I was born and raised in New York City, and she was born and raised in the Amazon jungle. But in a short period of time, I began to love her like my own family. Before I left, through tears, she promised me one thing, that she will never forget the way I danced bachata. And I promised her that I would never forget her. Thank you.
Next, we have Shelby Lane on conscious consumption of conflict minerals in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay, now it's time to take our minds to Africa. We're in Central Africa in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the continent's second largest country. The eastern region of the Congo has seen violence and destruction as a result of the Rwandan genocide spilling over into eastern Congo. Today, eastern Congo is reigned by violent militiamen who rape women, kill men, kidnap boys, and suppress the economy. Why is this taking place, you might ask yourself? Minerals. Minerals, money, and power. These minerals are tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold. They are known as conflict minerals, and they currently reside in your cell phones, laptops, and digital cameras. Once shipped out of the Congo, they land in our electronics. They are part of your computer, and they cause your cell phone to vibrate. But there is something that can be done. You can advocate for electronics companies to track where their minerals come from. And you can ask these companies to only buy from legitimate, conflict-free mines. You have a choice when buying electronics. Therefore, it is worth knowing about companies like Motorola, like HP, like Dell and Nokia, who are top leaders in the field of tracking their minerals and only purchasing from legitimate, non-violent Congolese mines. It is important to know, however, the bit of controversy that surrounds such corporate responsibility. Unfortunately, it is a terribly complex matter, one that will involve much governmental involvement and international action. The US government, in one section of the Dodd-Frank Act, has already acted by holding companies responsible for their mineral sources. While some argue that terminating mineral purchases from conflict mines is the solution, others claim that this resolution is now economically devastating local Congolese who rely upon the success of these mines, conflict mines, to provide their salaries and sustain their livelihoods. Others also argue that if American companies move out of these conflict mines, that other countries who have zero regard for the protection of human life will move their companies in and feed even further into the humanitarian crisis now taking place in the Congo as a result of this mineral exploitation. While it is necessary for the Congolese government to take action and for other countries to hold them responsible for terminating such horrific violence, I believe consumers must also bring awareness to this cause by communicating to electronics companies that their involvement is in fueling this heinous violence because of their environmental greed is entirely unacceptable, and that legitimate minds must be identified. Thank you.
So we've heard a lot tonight, from New York and the environment to specific colonies that are collapsing to alternative ways of connecting to the environment and to environmental issues that are part of the bigger world. I'd like to invite the class up to sit at this front of the stage, and Diane Dittrich and Catherine Bagley will be walking around with microphones. If you have any questions you would like to ask, now is the time to get some answers. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, and someone with a microphone will come to you.
I have a question for Eliza, sorry. So the biomimicry technologies, they're very cool, and I was wondering how you got into it and how you can ensure that these aren't just a fad that people think it's cool, but it actually can work.
So I actually found out specifically about the biomimicry movement when I was in Monterey, California this summer. They have a phenomenal aquarium. If you're ever there, you should go check it out. And they have a movie that I just sort of slipped into at the end, and they talked about some really cool biomimetic technologies. And that's how I got interested. There's a lot of effort being put into making sure that biomimicry is not a fad. A lot of educational programs that are starting from kindergarten through, past the college years into graduate programs. Some schools are now offering, degrees in biomimicry. There's lectures all over New York all the time about biomimicry, and I have not looked as extensively into other cities because I'm in New York, but there's lectures happening all over. So it is a danger that biomimicry could become a fad. It's a danger with a lot of things that seem very cool at first, and then people forget about them. But I do believe that the educational programs in place will make a difference.
Hi. First, outstanding presentation. Thanks, everyone. You guys are great. I was just curious, and I love the theme that essentially taking this knowledge and trying to translate it into action somehow. One of the sort of more pedestrian ways that some of us are trying to do that is to appeal to people's pocketbooks. So, I'm doing building energy efficiency stuff as a way to kind of cut carbon and get things moving. Have any of you had a chance to look at, so for example, but my heart is in things like collapsing colonies and collapsing biodiversity. So that team that was looking at sort of bees and coral reefs and stuff, there's a growing movement in economics now to sort of price the externalities, right? What's the cost of losing the bees? And it's staggering. I mean, I that's my gut feeling. But did you get a chance to look at that at all? Is there in any of the areas that you guys are looking at, and what are those costs?
Oh, I will not do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I looked a little bit at the economic cost of losing the honeybee, and what I found mainly is, well, a lot of the beekeepers stress the economic loss for the commercial beekeepers in particular, because for a lot of the beekeepers that I spoke to that sort of did it as a hobby, and especially Tom Theobald, the Boulder, Colorado beekeeper, he said that he could very well survive the exit of beekeeping from his life, that he sort of thought that his obsession with bees had become a sickness, and that the collapse of the colonies was definitely not okay, but he could subsist. For commercial beekeepers, that's not at all the case, and they're looking more and more at different methods that would allow them to continue to subsist. One of the methods that I did a little research on was the splitting half method, it's called. And basically in the colonies that collapse, they have to invest in another queen bee, which doesn't cost all that much, but multiplied in like the span of the amount of bees that they need to pollinate these huge monocultures, it does add up. And more than the actual cost of buying another queen bee, there was the labor cost, which is 20 minutes per splitting half colony. And if that's multiplied by the number of colonies that they have to split in order for the bees to continue pollinating these big monocultures, and particularly the almonds in California, it definitely does add up. I don't know, does that answer slightly?
One of the things I was curious about, what's the sort of macroeconomic effect on all of us?
Yeah.
There's a, if you look across the entire food spectrum, all plants, it's got a broader effect on society.
Definitely.
Shelby?
I can speak a little bit to that as well in terms of the macroeconomic impacts of conflict minerals. So once a lot of these smelters, the individuals, the companies that are buying these minerals and then selling them to these electronics companies, when acts were going in place, like the Dodd-Frank Act, for example, it was starting to say that companies needed to report whether they were purchasing from these conflict mines. And because of all this public pressure, these smelters rushed out of the Congo and started solely purchasing from other locations, be it Canada, which is very mineral rich, and certain locations in South America and elsewhere around the world. And what happened was, because this demand is millions and millions of dollars, they needed to keep this economy, this supply and demand continuing. And in order to sort of balance both, because there is not currently a method to track which mines yet are conflict-free, they're in the process of developing that, they just left the Congo altogether. And that's causing a lot of local economic destruction, but hopefully one that will allow these individuals to move on. Before being miners, a lot of these people were farmers, and they were pushed out of that to go into the mines. So there's a lot going on, but in terms of more of the global economy, there is such a high demand for a lot of these minerals that these smelters cannot afford to stop providing as much to these companies. So therefore, it would be in their greatest interest to someday go back and soon go back into the Congo in order, because that would allow them a larger supply pool from which to sell. So it would be in their interest to have these tracking systems in place so that companies can identify which ones are conflict-free versus conflict-ridden. So I think that right now it's a really big issue of supply and demand, and hopefully once they can put these tracking methods in place, some of the issue can begin to subside.
I'd just like to add real fast that I was in Genetics, Biodiversity, and Society, which is another science public policy class, and we read some economic papers on trying to come up with what the worth of the environment is, and there are a lot of very in-depth macroeconomic calculations that are very complex, and the numbers get very big very quickly, and it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around those numbers.
One thing I want to ask you, Shelby, you had a conversation with President Spar with regard to Barnard's responsibility with regard to conflict minerals. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So one of the ways in which a lot of activism can take place is for a company or college, such as Barnard, to look at what is its responsibility with regard to these electronics companies. Are they purchasing from companies that are really making big efforts in this field? And it turns out, fortunately, that Barnard is. We have a longstanding contract with Dell, and Dell is doing a lot of work in this field to track its minerals. That said, there's still a lot more that can be done. Dell should know that we support their efforts and that we enjoy being able to have a contract with them, and this is one of those main reasons. So I think that it's not enough just to say, okay, here's sort of the gold sticker, we're doing a great job, but okay, what's next? How can we actually now communicate to them that this is a priority of ours? And there are many petitions online, if you just type in petition conflict minerals into Google, there are tons that will come up and that are really important to communicate.
I just had one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't really matter though.
We can all hear you.
I was gonna ask the question, but I didn't see her up here. She's sitting in the front row.
Yeah, ask you. That's okay. Yes, there you go.
So I'm an amateur at most of this, but the oil spill that happened earlier this year, what type of hydrofracking was that? And was that, I heard, I don't know if you know a lot about it, I don't either, but was it even oil? Because I heard talks that it wasn't oil. And the other question was regarding the composting, what costs, it's a really, really ambitious idea. And do you know some of the costs involved in actually getting that instituted into other, schools or even parts of the country? So, I guess.
What oils? I don't know if this is on. What oil spill were you talking about?
It was the BP oil
The BP
spill.
oil spill.
Oh, okay. Because you said this year. That's why I was.
It was last year.
Yeah, I think it was last year. I don't really know that much if it was. I think that was. I don't think it was hydrofracking. I think it was like oil, like
drilling.
gas, like gasoline, not natural gas. Because hydrofracking is natural gas, not like gasoline oil.
Okay. So I'm not really sure of the specific cost. It would definitely be one of the greatest things to consider before we started a program like this. But we definitely have to get like the new infrastructure of the bins in the dorms, and then there might be new staff positions as well. I'm not sure how that would be covered. And then the contract with Action Carting for organics removal. The company that does the municipal composting where I live in Alameda is called Alameda County Industries, and they said that they don't really do composting to make a profit. It's primarily to fulfill the waste requirements of the state, and because it's the right thing to do, and the residents where I live are really into it. So it's not really something at this point that would make a profit. And like New York City also has a lot of trouble implementing a composting program. Like they have a program right now for fall leaves and Christmas trees, but it's on hold right now because of budget restrictions. So that's definitely a huge consideration.
I think I have a follow-up question. I'm trying to remember the numbers of it. It's like on the numbers. Was it 160 million tons?
165, yeah.
In the US?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're basically, it's almost a ton per person.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's pretty scary.
I have a question for Kiana about the medicinal plants. So I know a lot of those drugs can be synthesized in a lab. So I was just curious why there would be such a great over harvesting problem if you can synthesize them in the lab and not harvest them if you have that option.
I think this was Claire's presentation, I think. You showed this really great picture of a composting unit in the Hewitt Dining Hall, which I was really glad to see because I wasn't sure how that was all working. So could you maybe explain a little more in depth, like if all of the bins that we fill of food waste and how quickly that's processed, and because I'm really interested in seeing what actually follows through. So if you know anything about that.
All of that goes into the BioX composter in the kitchen, and then the majority of the like extra food from Hewitt that isn't eaten actually goes to places like homeless shelters, but everything else is composted using microorganisms. And it's really, the bin is really large, and it can compost. I'm not exactly sure how much mass it can compost each day, but it can take care of all of the food scraps from the dining hall. So. Oh, what do you mean, like? Oh, I don't think anyone sorts through all the waste on campus. It's just the one bin in Hewitt. Because, yeah, it is kind of strange that in the Diana they would provide compostable silverware that doesn't actually get composted. But, yeah, there's that problem.
Hi, I have a question for Wayu, Kiana, and Gabriella. So for Kiana and Wayu, I would like to know what can governments and organizations do to help prevent the problems of, I guess, bad mining, well, not bad, but abuse of the communities where they mine the oil, and abuse of the environment where they over-harvest the plants. And Gabriella, I'm curious as to how art within nature, like, I guess how that is helping environment, or like, I don't know, what is the significance of having art within nature?
I'll go first. Oh, I want to go first.
Okay,
Can
you
I
go
do that?
first.
I don't want to forget the question. I just have the phone.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's a good question, and in really Jewish fashion, I'm going to answer it with another question, which is sort of, what's the role of art anyway? And what's the point of art? And what is the value of art? And I think that those are all questions worth asking and worth thinking about. And in a day and age where resources are limited and there's a lot of overexploitation, I think that some of the stuff that Andy Goldsworthy was doing is really encouraging, and thinking about how we can bring art to be more sustainable. But I think that these questions, for me, I answer them that I think that art is worthwhile as a sort of an expression of humanity, and an expression of just people's souls on a really deep level. But I think that these are questions worth thinking about just in terms of what we spend our time on. And it's something that I thought about a lot in high school when I was starting to become an artist, of why am I spending my time on this? I should be fighting for any of the other things. And it's something to think about in terms of the project that I chose to do, in comparison to many of my classmates who were working on things that I think change people's lives in a different way. But I think that in terms of art, once you've accepted that art is inherently worthwhile, I think that thinking about even art within the environment, like the sculptures that we saw, well, where did the metal come from? And thinking about that question, and that's really where Andy Goldsworthy is going to it, but also thinking about different kinds of art, and what the Maya Lin piece that I showed with the different waves, and how that's really art within the environment, and it's echoing the environment in such a way that the environment itself becomes art. And so I think those are different ways of responding to how we can bring environmentalism and art together, and why we should do so. Answer your question?
Yeah, there's just a second part to the question real fast.
Okay. So I actually can think of two institutions or organizations. There's much more, but I think of particularly two. One is SHI, which is Sustainable Harvest Institution, which works in South America, and they teach farmers how to cultivate, which is basically just planting these medicinal plants and learning how to grow them and sell them. And that's one way to, that's another solution that has been implemented in order to help out the local communities. Also, the WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, in China also
also has had a mini little program that they implemented. They actually went to go to many villages and just look around for plants that are being overharvested and teach many of the indigenous peoples about the things that are being overharvested, give them like such things like surveys, or just have like just kind of like mini programs to teach them about the plants and how they're being overharvested, how many are being overharvested, and the possible solutions. So there are things being done, definitely.
I think we have time for one last question.
Oh, she didn't finish.
Yeah, we don't have time. It's okay. No, wait. We'll after. Find her after, so we'll talk more. One last question.
I have another question about the hydrofracking issue. She's leaving? Okay. So here's a long question. Okay. In New York City, I think the city just passed a law that a lot of the buildings in New York are going to have to convert to either using a lighter grade of oil or natural gas, right, for their heating and hot water. There's a lot of infrastructure work going on in natural gas in terms of building pipelines, gas stations. So natural gas is here to stay. It's going to grow a lot. Okay, little question about it. It's also one of the few natural resources that's pretty plentiful here in the United States, and it's not oil. It burns more cleanly. I think people kind of concede that. So here we have a problem. It's a great thing to have, and it seems like the hydrofracking is the issue. It's not the use of the actual stuff. So can you just go back a little bit and talk about before hydrofracking became an issue? How did they get the stuff, the natural gas, out of the ground? And can you give us a sense about what the cost benefit is in terms of how more productive it is to hydrofrack versus not hydrofrack? Because I think it's here to stay. I just don't know whether or not it can be done in an environmentally friendly way, and that's economic.
Well, you asked the same question that my dad keeps asking me. Okay. He says, can we do this in an environmentally friendly way? And I keep telling him the same thing. Well, I don't really think we can. As I said, there are two ways to hydrofrack. And they've been hydrofracking with vertical drilling for a very long time. And like, it's not great for the environment, but it's not as bad. But I think that with the horizontal drilling, that the deal is you get more of the natural gas, and obviously, like you said, natural gas is probably the way to go because oil is so bad and natural gas is better, and we have a lot of it. So I guess I would say that like there's a lot of environmental degradation costs for hydrofracking, but like you said, this Clean Heat Initiative, especially actually in this neighborhood, I think they're working with Columbia, because Barnard has switched over to the new whatever, I forgot what number something, fuel, and Columbia hasn't. So like we definitely need some way of getting this natural gas because we should be using it. So I think that if there were more research in this and there was a better way to extract the fuel, then the costs of using the natural gas would be like, it would be worth it. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
So unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time here tonight. I just want to let you know that we'll be around now for any other questions that you might have for us, and that there's lots of pie outside that's delicious, and you should eat it. Before I let you go, I just want to thank you for coming, and as part of ELEA, we spent the past semester exploring environmental issues and becoming really passionate experts on the topics we chose. So I hope that you leave tonight inspired to learn a little bit more, and perhaps even join us in doing a little bit more to make the world a more environmentally conscious place. The world is one large test, and we only have one chance at it, so let's not mess up. Thank you for coming. No more surprises. Okay, thank you, everybody. Good night.